Today, we will take a look at our theory of the Mica Miller case, but focus on the big picture, what was happening around Micah, and how she was a hero and not just a victim. Welcome to Fixate Today, Gray Matters. We are two ladies who needed a place to share our fixations, so we created a channel to do just that. Currently, we are focused on the Mica Miller case and want to explore the big picture happening in her world at the time she lost her life. Trigger warning to those who are uncomfortable with the topic of domestic violence. Our focus in this case is primarily about the circumstances in which Micah was living at the time she lost her life. It is widely accepted that JP was incredibly abusive to Micah and took advantage of his position as the church leader for personal and financial gains. Many think that he was using the nonprofit status of Solid Rock Church to avoid paying taxes. Another term you may have heard for tax-exempt charitable organizations, including churches, is 501c3 status.
Fraud is not discovered in nonprofit organizations for a variety of reasons. One of the reasons would be that there's quite a bit of turnover in nonprofit organizations because you have a lot of volunteers working in nonprofits. Another thing is management. Usually the layers of management are not nearly as deep so that you don't have the programs and the processes set up to be able to detect fraud. Then they won't have internal audit staff. They also won't have outside auditors who come in annually and perform an investigation to determine if the books and records are correct.
It is important to know that churches that meet the requirements of Section 501c3 of the IRS tax code are automatically considered tax exempt and are not required to apply for or obtain recognition of exempt status from the IRS. In other words, it is easier to achieve 501c3 status than you think. Donors are allowed to claim charitable deductions for donations to a church that meets the 501c3 requirements, and the church did not either have to seek nor the IRS recognize that status.
The voluntary redistribution of wealth is as old as time. For a while, the Christian church had somewhat of a monopoly on the concept of charity. Then, around the 20th century, religion's bigger, dumber brother, capitalism, stepped in and took the wheel. At a certain point, a bunch of millionaire a-holes figured out how to exploit that compassionate little itch in the back of your mind. And now
501c3 recognized churches have less oversight and meddling from the IRS, which could lead one to wonder if that freedom may lead to ripe conditions for financial corruption. Now, I am not saying that this is necessarily the case for Solid Rock Church, or any church for that matter, but it is something to keep in mind as we proceed through this case. Okay, so back to JP. We all know that he was a bit of a squirrely guy, to say the least. It is widely accepted that he was taking advantage and fleecing his congregation financially. But could grief have led him to criminal activities that went beyond that? Had he been involved in a more large-scale organized crime ring and gotten himself in way over his head?
Not all secrets are sacred. Imagine an organization quietly amassing a $100 billion fortune, hidden behind layers of financial transactions. This isn't just wealth. It's a carefully orchestrated operation to disguise the origins of vast sums of money. Money laundering begins by taking donations meant for good and funneling them through complex accounts. These funds are then masked behind false records, making it appear as though they're being used for legitimate purposes. Surprisingly, internal fraud costs churches over $63 million annually. In reality, the money stays hidden, stockpiled instead of spent. What happens when the truth about this concealed fortune is exposed?
The church has just passed the $10 million mark.
When billions are at stake, the truth can't stay buried forever.
We believe the focus on the loss of Micah's life has been overshadowing a much larger criminal network that JP may have been involved with, and that Micah wanted nothing to do with. Could she have wanted out, but knew too much, and understood that getting away from this life would be extremely dangerous due to the things she had witnessed? Maybe a member of a federal agency investigating a major organized crime ring approached her to become an informant and collect evidence. We believe that there are 2 layers, or possibly more, to what we have been seeing unfold in this case. That the loss of Micah's life and JP's inappropriate way of announcing it to his congregation caught the attention of the world in a way nobody anticipated.
I got a call late last night. My wife has passed away. And yeah, it was self-induced, and it was up in North Carolina. And we're going to have a funeral for her next Sunday here at 3 p.m. And so it's all I can, I'm just kind of going on adrenaline right now. So y'all pray for me and my kids and everybody. And y'all knew that she wasn't well mentally, and that she needed her medicine that was hard to get to her.
Micah may have been compiling evidence about the criminal activities of JP and others in his circle, and possibly leveraged that to get away from it all and to expose the evil that was happening. We think Micah was not only a victim, but also a hero who may have saved countless others at the expense of her life. Micah was extremely brave and selfless, and will be celebrated one day for her actions. Her bravery, along with extensive federal investigations, will hopefully lead to many bad people being arrested for their unspeakable deeds, and many victims being freed. The rapid involvement of the FBI was the biggest indicator that something much bigger was going on. But other pieces started to be revealed, such as JP's comments about Micah's use of the term, quote, double agent.
When she's in a delusional state of mind, I have to play into it in order to get her back on medicine. So the first year or two, when she'd say something, I'd say, that's not true, that's not real. She'd get mad and blow up and, knock a hole in the wall or something like that. So then by December 2019, I think it was, we were watching TV, and she just stopped and said, you're a double agent. And I said, no, I'm not. She says, yes, you are. She said, and I'm going to call the police. She said, you're a double agent, you've stolen my things, and I'm going to put you in jail. And I was like, oh my goodness, what do I do? She hadn't been taking her medicine.
The discovery that JP was partial owner in a bar called Crocodile Rocks, and the revelation that he often brought bags of cash home or to his church from the bar. Also strange was the use of a canine unit when police originally searched the church, which are primarily used to expose drugs or cash. Based on these factors, as well as many more, make us think this is a much larger case than the public has been led to believe. Money laundering seems like a plausible explanation for the things we've seen going on, but the level of FBI involvement points to an operation that went much beyond the scope of just the church. So, what is money laundering? The short answer is it's the concealment of the origins of illegally obtained money, typically by means of transfers involving foreign banks and legitimate businesses. Actually, the term money laundering originated from gangsters in the 1920s and 30s who used legitimate businesses to hide the proceeds of their illegal activities. These gangsters often owned cash-only businesses such as laundromats and restaurants, and would mix their illegal earnings with the legitimate business income. The cash-heavy nature of these businesses made it difficult to trace the true sources of the money. Something to keep in mind: Crocodile Rocks is primarily a cash-only establishment, and churches often rely on a large amount of cash donations. Who would have introduced JP to involvement in a larger money laundering scheme? Well, we have a good guess, but we will get into that a little later. How did JP become the despicable man he is?
God, that's a great question. Man, that's such a good question.
Well, my guess would have to be the environment he grew up in, including the friends he interacted with and the influences of his upbringing from his family. JP has been blessed with charm and an uncanny ability to memorize and quote the Bible, which he uses to manipulate people of faith who are seeking a greater purpose and meaning to life.
I believe in healing. I believe in miracles. I believe in the raising of the dead. I'm a one God, apostolic, tongue-talking, holy rolling, born-again, heaven-bound believer in the liberated power of Jesus' name. I'm not ashamed of it.
He is also a talented musician, which doesn't hurt.
I'm so thankful to God for a strong family and the friends that God has put in my life to be there for me at this time. I'm trying to get my priorities straight right now. And that's making sure that my heart doesn't have any unforgiveness, bitterness, resentment, just forgiveness and hope for the future and peace. Because you can't put a price on peace from God. So, thank you for all your prayers and support. Know that I have to keep my circle really, really small right now. I'm used to having a really big circle, so it's hard because I want to reach out to everybody and tell you how much I love you and I miss you. But this is the best way that I know how. So, I love you all. I miss you. Thank you for your love and support over the last couple years. And some of you, up to 18 years walking with me as my friends. And for right now, I've just had to put everything on pause to get myself right. And I think God's happy with that. So keep praying for me. Thank you.
He is an evil man who used his authority to abuse his wife and fleece his congregation of believers. He had grown up in this area and built lifelong friendships, as well as trust and the admiration of others that can only be achieved through generations. He is a bad guy who figured out how to work the system and used control to abuse his wife and keep her quiet about his unsavory dealings. So in 2020 and 2021, many facets of the economy suffered, due in part to COVID. This included regulations on churches to limit person-to-person contact. It would seem likely that also meant a downturn in donations. Additionally, restaurants and bars were obviously impacted by the new regulations. In fact, Craig Smith, who is a fellow co-owner of Crocodile Rocks, even spoke out to the media regarding the need for lifting these regulations that had been put in place for people's safety, but were greatly affecting business owners' bottom line. Could it be that both entities needed supplementary income at this time to make the money they needed to support their lifestyles? We know that outward appearances of wealth, success, and power were extremely important to JP. And more importantly, JP had to maintain his dominance in his marriage and not admit weakness. Desperate times led to desperate measures. One thing JP had going for him was the respect of his community and trusting relationships he had built over his lifetime. In another video, we introduced his inner circle of friends. We noticed in 2021, it seemed like the mayhem surrounding JP's life significantly increased. We started hearing more about his mistreatment and abuse of Micah, as well as an increased discussion from JP about her so-called mental illness, including involuntary hospitalizations to mental health centers, which were initiated by JP. There's more mention of Micah being isolated from friends and family, JP's obsession with forcing medications on her, and his sermons becoming more and more unhinged and seemingly targeted at his wife. There is JP's so-called intimate relationship with Susie Skinner and the death of her husband, Chris. We need to look further into just what the nature of his and Susie's relationship really is. I might be going out on a limb here, but it seems to me the suggestions it was romantic may have actually been a cover to detract from other dealings between the two of them. Around 2021, JP seems to become more involved at Crocodile Rocks and inexplicably becomes a partial owner. We hear more about buying, selling, and transferring of lands, homes, and businesses by JP and several of the people around him, and see an accumulation of a large number of vehicles in the church's name. Throughout the year 2021, signs of JP's paranoia become more and more evident. It is critical to note that all of this is happening in South Carolina, which is considered one of the most criminal-friendly states in the country due to legal loopholes and law enforcement corruption, which we will explore more in a future video. It is known that in Horry and Georgetown counties, around 3,000 businesses wired a total of $700 million to a host of unsavory organizations, including Mexican and Colombian drug cartels and Middle Eastern terrorist groups. Myrtle Beach is the center of much of this activity. Of course, this is not to say that any of these activities had anything to do with JP. But what if he had been lured to, or at least introduced to, this facet of organized crime around 2021, when money could have been tight from the COVID restrictions? Could he have been in way over his head, and might his other transgressions and ignorance not only exposed himself, but also his colleagues? This case has garnered headlines throughout the country and gathered web sleuths, as JP calls them, from across the world to scour through the evidence in an effort to make sense of this case. It seems possible to me that in addition to JP's abuse, stalking, stealing from the church, and many other criminal behaviors, he may have been cocky enough to move on to the big boys table. His behaviors and carelessness could possibly have implicated dozens of his friends, co-conspirators, in larger criminal enterprises, answering to even more ruthless and powerful players where the stakes are very high and they don't mess around when it comes to protecting themselves. Most of the time, with crime at this level, those involved are committing other types of crime as well, especially drug and human trafficking. Could this explain why the FBI got involved so quickly? Could this explain the reason the local police and authorities have not been forthcoming with the public? Could JP have become so overconfident in his abilities that he had perfected all of his life, from stealing from Solid Rock Church, to think it was time to up his game? Could he have become a minnow in the big sea of organized crime? Could Micah have figured this out and want no part of it? Or could her divorcing JP have led to a closer look into their finances, which would uncover his financial transgression? This is a lesson that JP took from his first divorce, as well as from his parents' divorces. Divorce can lead to information being made public record. Could Micah's sense of values and morality have led her to reporting this behavior at a federal level that would have exposed not only JP, but also those in his inner circle? Could Micah have lost her life as a result of JP's greed and struggles for power? Could this explain why JP has not already been arrested for the crimes he openly admits to? There are so many more questions to ask. We believe when you factor in other activity happening in the country at that time, we may expose unspeakable criminal activity that they may have been part of, or at least adjacent to. We are talking about heinous crime, and that will help us understand just what a hero Micah was. However, we need to never lose sight that the life of an innocent woman is the true tragedy. Micah was a daughter, a sister, and a friend. We want to make sure that everyone realizes she was a hero also. Please join us as we analyze the case and bring attention to South Carolina's legal system's inadequacies in both the financial sector as well as the protection of women from systemic abuse. Hopefully, this tragic loss of life can bring awareness, change, and save lives in the future. To learn more about money laundering and human trafficking as they apply to this case, please click on the links. We ask, if you enjoyed this, please like, comment, subscribe, and check out our podcast, Fixate Today, Gone Tomorrow. Thanks for watching.
Disclaimer: we are not investigators, journalists, detectives, law enforcement, or historians. We are two neurodivergent ladies who just hyperfixate. Please do not take our opinions and ideas as statements of fact. All allegations are just that. We are not accusing anyone of anything, simply offering our interpretation of what we've researched.